Welcome everybody to the BIDE podcast, the podcast of Barcelona International Dance Exchange. Today in episode 142, we are with Cristina Ward. Welcome, Cristina. We are super happy that you're joining us today.
Thank you, Zoe. It's lovely to be with you. Thanks very much for the invitation.
You're so welcome. So I thought we would start just to give our listeners a little bit of an introduction to you. So if you could tell us where you are, first of all, and that can be as descriptive as you like. And following that, if you could just give us a bit of insight into who Cristina is. So not necessarily, I mean, of course, tell us what you do, but not necessarily just focusing on that. So if you'd like to share a bit of background, or how would you like our listeners to learn about you?
Let me think. Well, in answer to your first question, so I'm in Madrid. I'm actually right now in the British Council offices in Madrid because I work at the British Council. I'm head of arts there. And this is in the center of town for anybody who knows the city. So it's an old-fashioned palace. And we're on a very kind of nice leafy avenue, so it's a good place to work. And in fact, I'm very lucky because I sometimes walk to work, which is about 45 minutes walk, which is really nice as well. So I managed to get some exercise in when I'm doing that. And so that's where I am. And then in terms of who I am, well, I think to start with, to say that I was born and brought up in the UK because my dad was English and my mum was Spanish. And I moved to Spain at the end of the 1980s. And I've been here ever since. So I'm one of those people, I actually consider myself to be very, very lucky in the sense that I do feel that I'm very much, well, I'm kind of from both and from neither of the two countries. But certainly I do have that bilingual background and that bilingual cultural background, which I think has helped me tremendously over the years. From things such as simple as, when I moved here at the end of the 1980s, beginning of the 1990s, I moved to Spain. There weren't that many people. There were not as many people as there are now, for example, who spoke English. So in terms of getting work and finding jobs, it was a real help. But just having that knowledge and that kind of instinctive knowledge of UK culture, and then having lived here for so long, and also my mother is Spanish, so was Spanish, so I'm half Spanish, also giving that instinctive knowledge and understanding of Spanish culture. So in the end, you've got those two parallel universes, which has, I think, had a profound effect on me, definitely professionally, but also personally. So that's kind of what I would say about myself right now. But if you want to keep digging, I could keep answering.
No, that's great. I'm in awe of the bilingual aspect. Obviously, I'm trying very hard at the moment to brush up on my own Spanish. So I'm always very much in awe.
Keep going.
I shall, definitely. I don't have a choice. It's fascinating, and I wonder, maybe let's just stay with that for a second. So in terms of it was interesting you saying that your identity is in that sense is split in a sense. You're a bit, you live in both camps in that sense. And maybe just, could you tell us a little bit more about that, how you feel that identity has shaped you?
Well, it gives you a certain objectivity, I think. So, living in Spain, and as I say, I've been here much longer than I was in the UK. So I came here when I was 22. And in that sense, I think that those kind of formative years were spent in the United Kingdom. So in that sense, I think that really makes an impact on the way you are. Even from my accent, lots of people don't realize that I'm not, people, don't think that I could spend so much longer in Spain than in the UK because I sound so English. Whereas when I speak Spanish, I also sound Spanish. And so I think, so as I was saying, so that it gives you gives you that objectivity in general terms, I think, to sort of step back and look at things a little bit from the outside. And then there's always that thing about being slightly different, which I think is a nice thing. Sometimes it's a bit, it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. I mean, not very different, but it does make it brings in the difference. So it's something to talk about with people, and I would say that really. But yes, I mean, it's interesting because I think I consider that the UK is part of Europe, Definitely.
Me too.
So, exactly. So we're both, Spain and the UK are European countries, absolutely. And we do have in many ways, obviously, we're living in probably the most privileged part of the world. So we have that in common as well. But again, it's very different cultures.
Mm.
And so that's it. They're interesting contrasts as well. I think it's very enriching. And as I said earlier, I feel very, very fortunate. And, through no merit of my own, I feel very lucky to have had this kind of dual background.
Absolutely. And I guess that there's a parallel with that in the role that you're now doing with the British Council.
Yep.
So maybe let's spend a little bit of time looking at that from the perspective of what you feel your work brings to that performing arts ecosystem. And when I say the performing arts ecosystem, specifically the one that you find yourself in. So I guess building bridges, perhaps, but I'll let you explain a little bit more about what you do and how that contributes to the broader ecosystem of the performing arts industry.
Thank you. Yes, I'd love to. So just as an anecdote, it's funny because so when I arrived in Spain at the end of the 80s, I started off by doing alternative street theatre because I'd studied drama in the UK and I was very into doing street theatre, and I met my future husband and he was into street theatre as well. But after a couple of years, I decided I needed to start doing a kind of job that would bring in a salary at the end of the month. And funnily enough, one of the first places I worked for a few months was at the British Council at that time. And I was actually replacing somebody who was on leave. And I came into the British Council. I remember at the time thinking, oh, I really want to work here. And then I went away and did a lot of other stuff and came back many years later. I actually started working in the British Council in the arts department again. I think it was 2013, and then became head of arts 3 years ago. So obviously my background in that sense has helped a great deal because I feel an absolute passion. I studied drama and Spanish at university in the UK. I've always been very involved in the arts. I have a great passion about the arts, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later on in the podcast. But I think I've forgotten what the question was, Zoe. Sorry.
No, don't worry at all. About what you're bringing to that ecosystem of the performing arts.
Okay.
So be that opportunities or
sorry, yes.
No, that's fine.
So obviously again, so this dual nationality we were talking about before has helped a great deal in that, although I haven't lived in the UK for a long time, as I was saying, I feel I have that kind of instinctive knowledge about the arts sector in the UK, which is very helpful, although luckily in the way we are structured at the British Council. So just briefly for many people who may not know what we do. So at the British Council, what we do is we're the international, we're the official UK organization for cultural relations. So we're not the embassy, we're an independent body, but it's our job to promote and facilitate cultural relations between the UK and all the countries where we are. And what this means, it's actually changed a lot over the years. And I think where we are now is that whereas in the past it was all about it was all about showcasing. Well, actually, there's another thing I'd like to mention about the British Council, which I think is very interesting given the geopolitical situation at the moment. So the British Council was actually created in 1936, I believe. And it was created at a time where there was this rise in fascism and in far-right movements around the world. And at that point, the UK government decided that they needed to facilitate the creation of an organization which would not be connected directly to the government, but would be present around the world to continue cultural relations around the world. Let's not forget at that time, it was, no internet, no nothing. So it was very, there was less communications. So it's sad to think in a way that the way the world was when the British Council was created back in 1936, the situation is not a great deal better right now. And it's ironic to think that actually for many years towards the end of the 20th century, that mission of the British Council lost, in a sense, was not so important in that there was much more world peace and prosperity, because our mission is to help facilitate peace and prosperity around the world. And sadly now we are once again in a position where, those cultural relations are so absolutely essential. So as I was saying, whereas a few years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, the mission of the British Council in what we do in the arts was much more about showcasing the excellent, the best of UK arts. Now we are much more all about trying to create or trying to facilitate, because we are facilitators, trying to facilitate collaboration and cooperation between artists and artistic organizations, in this case between Spain and the UK. Understanding that also we still firmly believe that the artistic space is where we need to have freedom of expression, where equality and diversity is top of the list, where we feel that we have that capacity to be able to open up the space to as many people as possible, to as diverse as people as possible, because in the end those conversations are what help us live together, understand each other, support each other, help each other. So that's really kind of a bit about, so that's the sort of, if you like, the philosophy behind what we do. And that, how does that translate down into what we do, what we actually do? So we work across all art forms, and basically, as I say, we're facilitating connections between artists and artistic organizations from both countries, to work together, to learn from each other, to give, to share best practices, to have those conversations.
Wonderful. And I think it's super vital, isn't it, as you were saying? And I guess in a way, because the organization has been around for quite some time now, so 90 years we're looking at, 10 years to go.
Yes.
But I guess, the way that it's had to shift and respond throughout history and throughout time must be quite an interesting journey as well. On a slightly different note, actually, we will come back to some of that a bit later, because I'll be asking you a question from one of our previous guests on the podcast, and it links slightly. So I'll just move away from that slightly for now. Where do you draw inspiration from, Cristina? What inspires you?
Oh, so many things. There are so many things that I can be inspired for these days. I mean, again, I feel a very privileged person, in that I work in a sector which inspires me continuously. So whether it's going to see an exhibition, or reading a book, or going to see a play, or going to see a dance performance, I'm also inspired by the courage of so many people who, I mean, again, I think it's very easy to forget how privileged, what a privileged person I am, and the privileged, situation that we live in. So, you particularly, actually, that is very interesting, because the British Council is a global organisation. So we have colleagues and British Council offices around the world, in in obviously regions like like Europe, and then in other regions around the world, as in Africa, Asia. And so you often hear about amazing projects that are happening on the ground in countries which are in, conflict, in Lebanon, places like that, in Palestine. And I think just the work that my colleagues, again, are facilitating in those sort of places is just, I just feel very inspired and very humbled by what they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can understand that totally. And I think it gives you a view into scenarios across the world as well. I think when you're working globally, it really can open your perspective as well, can't it? And that, within that lies much inspiration.
And then I'm again very, very fortunate, because so many of the artists, one of our main objectives is to help emerging artists as well. And it's so exciting to be working, to have that opportunity to work with young people and see, and get that energy and that positivity from young people who are actually, these days living in a very challenging environment.
Absolutely. And do you still feel that? Do you still feel that that young, fresh energy is there?
Yes, I do. I mean, I do it so the day before yesterday, as I said, I live in Madrid. And the day before yesterday, there was this kind of traditional festivity taking place in one of the neighborhoods, one of the most kind of popular neighborhoods in Madrid, which is called Lavapiés, which is in the center of the city. And it's one of these kind of cool, these days very cool neighborhoods. And they've recovered a tradition that used to take place well, started happening many years ago and then stopped for a while, and it was recovered about 10 years ago, which is called La Fiesta de las Mayas, which doesn't really have a translation into English. But basically, Maya was a young girl, and this festivity was all around presenting them. It was a bit like the debutantes in a way, because they were presenting them to the public once they got, to marrying age. And so now they've recovered this festivity, and these local associations in Lavapiés set up these kind of thrones around a church in one of the streets, thrones which are decorated with wildflowers and lace, and it's kind of, very kind of focused on folklore. And I went the other day because my daughter, with a group of her friends, she's 28, they were involved in setting up one of these thrones. And it was just so brilliant to see, first of all, how they're recovering a lot of folklore music, folk music, which otherwise would get lost. And lots of young people kind of doing that. And to see them just, rejoicing in being together and singing and dancing, it was, it was really lovely. It was very, very touching.
That's really interesting, actually, because I'm sure a couple of days ago I heard in the UK that many places are embracing maypole dancing again.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel that we went through a wave, and I am very much generalizing. This is not based on research, but we went through quite a long period where traditional folklore was being lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel there is perhaps this maybe people are being drawn back to community and togetherness
Yeah.
somehow, simplicity of that.
I think that, that's also, again, very generalistic from my side, because I haven't done any research either, but I think in Spain that's definitely the case. And I think, as you say, it's also embracing a bit coming back to a bit, to nature, right? To the kind of a simpler way of life, and also that kind of community spirit as well. But obviously with a kind of modern touch as well at the same time. It's not going back exactly to how it used to be done, but yeah, that's interesting that that's also happening in the UK. So it's probably a general kind of shift,
Yes, possibly. And I think in
yeah,
the face of adversity, people want things that make them feel good and connected, and
yes,
that are quite
absolutely,
light in that
yes,
sense.
yeah,
Or they obviously also can go very political and very politically minded. And yes. Okay, interesting. So if young people might be questioning that sense of belonging, what are you questioning right now at this point in your
sorry,
journey?
I didn't hear you.
Sorry, what are you questioning? What are some of the questions that you're facing in your own life at the moment?
Oh, so many. What's going on? No, I think we are in an incredibly dark place at the moment. If that's, I think, where more or less what you're asking. I do have this pet theory there, that this is a natural consequence of having gone through that pandemic, 6 years ago now, and that was actually going to open the door into a difficult time. But I'm a true believer. I think I'm an optimist. I am an optimist, and I do truly believe that it will eventually start getting better. I think things are kind of on this downward spiral right now, but hopefully we will be in time. And again, I really, I really hope that young people will be able to take the helm and get us out of this incredible mess at some point. So what was the question again, Zoe? That's the second time I've forgotten. I go off on a ramble and then I'm not
That's
quite
fine.
sure
It's,
what.
to be
Sorry
honest,
about that.
the rambles are lovely for people to engage
Okay.
with, so it's all good. No, what are you questioning? What burning questions do you have? And it might be in your life or in your practice or your, I don't know. You might.
It's interesting. Well, in my practice, we've certainly shifted. It's not just the shift, that I mentioned just now about, very much, well, on the one hand, we're also, about being so much more focused on doing collaborative work and encouraging and facilitating collaborative work. I think the way that our work is now so focused, and this is something I really love about working for the British Council, is that we're allowed to be focused on what we believe to be important in the arts. So, for example, we're very interested in artists who are responding to the climate crisis, who are really taking sustainability not only into their own practice, but also what they do is to help make society aware of the importance of forests, or being sustainable. Needless to say, the absolute necessity of being as diverse and as inclusive as possible. So, whether it is with gender or with underrepresented minorities or people from other cultures. And I think in that sense, although there are lots of issues in the UK, we take a lot of inspiration again from the UK and that diversity in the UK culture, which is very much thanks to that massive immigration that happened after the Second World War, everyone coming in to hand, to give a hand. And that fortunately has given so much to UK culture as a whole. And I think, in fact, over the centuries, it could be said that UK culture has always kind of, made the most of cultures from around the world, whenever, when it was an empire and making colonies and taking from those colonies, or when that empire finished, fortunately, and people coming over. So I think and also, so in that sense, the British Council is very focused on us giving a platform to all those diverse manifestations and people from diverse backgrounds, which I think is so important. So sustainability, access, diversity, young people. So it's not exactly actually answering your question about what do I question, but what I want to say is that, I mean, in that sense, yeah, I think the way our work is going, or what we're supporting, is very, very, very interesting, because we have to do it. We have to, I mean, it's for our survival. We have to become sustainable. We have to find ways to cope with this climate emergency. We have to be more diverse. We have to open the door. You can't shut people out. You have to take them in. This is just the way it is, and it's wonderful. And it's so much more enriching for everybody if if that happens. So yeah. So I mean, very, very disappointing where we are right now, and I feel very disillusioned and disappointed in the in general, in politics, in people who are actually shaping our future. It seems that we are very much in the hands of very, very, very rich people. And this, it's extraordinary, isn't it, that you hear, every time kind of you open a newspaper, you see that the number of billionaires is rising, and the number of displaced people is also massively rising. That difference is growing. No, that difference between is getting wider and wider every day, when it should be the other way around. So yeah, all that is very, very disappointing. And it's just, I mean, from our position, again, I think the arts is such a powerful tool to be able to open people's minds and begin conversations, and bring so many more people into the conversation. So in that sense, we have that mission. So yeah. So for example, do I think that art should be political? Yes, I do. I mean, it's not always, but well, it is. I mean, whether it's always obvious or not. But yeah, I think arts has a powerful role to play in that.
I think there's something really interesting actually in how you did just answer that question, because yes, okay,
no, I think on a tangent.
Not directly necessarily, but I think what's interesting is, or what I can take from it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in a way you are questioning, but your role within the British Council actually facilitates others to question. And I think there's a sense of direction in what we need to be questioning within society, that perhaps there's a chance there that you're providing a safe space for people to do that, and also facilitating younger artists or other artists from around the world to be able to do that together, which is vitally important at this time of divisiveness and and fear, I think. So no, I think you did answer it. I think we're all questioning very similar things at the moment, perhaps.
I think so. And I think it's also, and you've also met, you've hit the nail on the head there, because the British Council in general, and my role as well, it's not about, it's about facilitating. So we have our strategies, for example, as I mentioned just now, our strategies of supporting artists who are responding to the climate crisis, except, but we are just responding to needs and to tendencies that are happening anyway. We don't sort of say, we don't impose anything on anybody, but we see where the strength of arts lies, and we try and support that in our modest way as much as possible.
Absolutely. This is a question that's slightly aside from the usual questions we ask, but we like to be inspired by our guests as well. Would you say you're a curious person? What keeps you curious, may I ask?
Well, I think yeah, I mean, the day you stop being curious, I mean, just forget
Yeah.
it. um, I suppose because I mean, I like to be inspired by things and by people,
Mm,
and you can always learn so much from people, even when you're not expecting it. And um, so yeah, I suppose, stay curious to stay young, or what. No, I don't know about that. No, I've just made that up. That was just, but I think, yeah, young people and new. I mean, the great thing about the arts as well is they surge forward continuously. They surprise you the whole time. You can be surprised by suddenly an exhibition in a small space, and you see something which makes you go wow. And so I suppose in the arts, that constant challenge, uh, is something that I find very, very inspiring. And yeah, I like that a lot.
mm,
um, but I think also just trying to sort of find answers to this weird geopolitical general situation where, we're in the hands of social media and everything's gone upside down, and
mhm.
people don't read anymore and people don't speak to each other, and it's all apps and this, that, and the other. I suppose, yeah, it's also trying to find ways around that, because that's, it's not my thing particularly. And I
Mm.
think technology is absolutely mind-blowing, and obviously what's happened, our digital revolution, is the strongest revolution I think we've ever had in the history of mankind, or with personkind. But it's
And
really
perhaps,
out of control right now. I think, well, again, cyclical. It'll probably, hopefully, at one point get under control. But
mm, I think the
mm,
speed of that revolution as well has been something quite
mm,
mind-blowing. It's
absolutely,
perhaps faster than previous real shifts. If we look at industrialization, things
yeah,
happen over time, whereas I think
yeah,
with technology, the speed of development is
exactly,
just it's
yeah,
unfathomable,
absolutely,
really. Yes, for want of a better word.
absolutely, yeah,
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 yeah. Okay, we have a question that we ask, and we actually use this as a feedback structure for our Barcelona meeting, so the annual
right.
exchange that we do in Barcelona. I think we've touched on quite a lot of this actually, because you've offered much about quite a lot about these points, but I will just ask you anyway. So based on this slightly more philosophical perspective of what do you have, what do you leave with others, I guess, and what do you take from others, um, as a approach to life, I guess. And you can answer this in any way. It can be to do with your personal life or your just day to day, the way that you deal with people and others or conversations. So I find it's easier to focus in a little bit on an aspect, if you like. So what do you have? I know you've already mentioned several things about access to other artists and countries and perspectives. Privilege, of course, we've mentioned. I'm just trying to think of some pointers that
Mm,
might help guide. What
mm,
do you wish to leave? What do you feel you leave people with?
mm.
And what are you a magpie for?
I love connecting people. I've kind of only realized that in the last couple of years. I think also because I have the fortune in the job that I have, that I'm able to sometimes, you know, facilitate that happening. So I really like connecting artists with places or venues or festivals, and it may not be even UK, Spain. It might be Spain, Spain. It might be Spain, Greece. It's like, 'cause that's the other one of the nice things about the British Council as well, is that one of the amazing things is the fact that it's a global network. So
Mm,
we're not working on our own. We're always working together with colleagues across, in my case, across the EU, well, across the world, but obviously in my case more in the EU. So I think, so do you mean like, say for example, when I retire, what is the question? What do I think I will leave behind? What do I think people will think?
yeah, sure. I think it's a difficult one because it can be in multiple contexts. We talk with
Yeah.
so many people that for an artist or a dancer that's working in a company, this question is quite different if it's project related. But absolutely, what's your legacy, perhaps, or what do
Well,
you feel that is?
but I also feel that in terms of work,
Mm,
um, the British Council is the sum of so many people who have worked here over the years and have done the job that and I think it's layers.
mm,
It's not one single person. It certainly won't just be me. It's what we kind of keep adding to what's come before. So where we are now, even though we might be having different strategies now because there are different challenges that are more urgent. For example, the climate crisis is not something we talked about particularly 15 years ago, or whatever. But our mission, the way that we hope that people trust us, that we hope to be as innovative as possible, that open-minded, all that is something that I hope that people feel about me in a professional situation. But that is really thanks to the layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of what have come before and what will come after. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's with the British Council, the sum of many, many, many parts.
Absolutely.
And so I can't think of anything specifically that you know what I mean. And it's not just because I want to. I don't want to blow my own trumpet and at all. But I do think in this sense, it is in a way, it's a team effort. So, and also I think when you're working for an organization such as this, when you're working in a cultural institution in a management position, as I do, at the end of the day, we are facilitating the important bit, which is the artists.
Sure.
They are the ones who are going to really leave that legacy. And so that's our mission. Our mission as cultural managers is to help that to happen. So we're just facilitator, I mean, it's a big job as well. It's
Absolutely. And it's a vital job for so
yeah.
many of those artists as well. And I
Oh,
guess that's the
absolutely.
beauty of this ecosystem
Yeah.
within which, we all exist and work.
Exactly.
So we've spoken a lot about the state of the world, I guess. And I think it's, yeah, exactly, inevitably. I think it's totally unavoidable in this time. Have you ever thought about quitting?
Not from the British Council, I have to say. In the past, I have. I mean, obviously, because I'm 62 now, so I mean, I've been working all my life in the arts, so I've had several jobs, and there have been times in the past when I've just, it's become too much. I think professionally, it's good to. It's funny though. On the one hand, British Council is the kind of place where people hang around for a long time, normally. And I certainly don't have any plans on leaving right now, anytime soon. So in answer to your question, at the British Council, I've not yet anyway, thought about quitting. But in the past, yes, in fact, I have done. In fact, I have quit jobs. I've always been lucky enough to kind of not necessarily go on to a new one straight away, but I've always been lucky in that eventually I have found work. So yes, there have been a couple of times in my professional career when I have resigned because I just felt that I wasn't, I wasn't giving enough, and the job wasn't giving enough to me. I think also in the arts, I mean, in arts management, it's they are very there's a lot of pressure. There's kind of quite stressful jobs sometimes, and I think also, I mean, it's not my case, but it is a bit. But if you're programming and stuff, I think there comes a time when it's a good idea to step aside and do something different. You can't afford to sort of get bogged down or for it to become routine. I think that's the key as well, and that's one of the other wonderful things about what I do. It's never routine because it's never the same, and we have these kind of global strategies, but then the activities that we're working on are always different. And I think it's very, very important. And I think for artists as well, you see that in artists when suddenly an artist goes and releases a new record which is completely different to the stuff they've had before, and they might get criticized. No, why have you? It's like, well, I had to keep going. I had to do something new. So I think again, then you have to take this in the context that you're living in. And sometimes people, it is very difficult to leave a job when you don't know what job you're going to be going to next. And let's be realistic, life is difficult, the world is difficult, etc. So I totally understand it when people stay, but at the same time, changing a job is it's a very refreshing thing, a good thing to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it can be, definitely. And to gain perspectives. But like you say, with the variety in your role, it's lovely that you have that. And that clearly some lovely long careers in the British Council as well. Cristina, we have to ask this question. What has been, do you feel, and in the arts, I think people are quite used to being out of their comfort zone
Mm,
often. But what do
mm.
you feel has been your biggest mistake to
You
date?
know, yeah. I mean, I've made,
Where have you really messed up?
yeah. There have been mistakes. Obviously, there have. I mean, from things as basic as I remember when I was working, I did a lot of production work in performing arts a few years ago. Things as basic as, booking somebody a flight from Mexico to Madrid on their artistic name and not checking what their real name was, so that when they got to the airport, they couldn't get on the plane.
Oh dear.
That was one. I'm just, what the other one? I mean, there have been mistakes. Obviously, there have. I'm trying to think of really. I mean, not that. To be quite honest with you, there's never been really anything really, really, mind blowing or awful that I haven't. But uh, I don't know, clashing rehearsal schedules. That's occasionally. Thinking that a project was going to be. I mean, I remember one time with a training. Oh, I remember one time with a training program we organized. I won't say at what point in my professional career this happened. Organizing a training program and just presuming that loads of people would sign up, and then nobody signed up, and so desperately trying to find people to sign up. That kind of like mad panic about. So those so yeah, I mean, it's not to say, yeah, I can't think of any other really massive ones.
Mm.
But there are always mistakes.
Mhm.
Or you may, I don't know, mess up a budget or suddenly go over budget. But I think one of the things I would say about myself, which is a positive thing, is that I am, I'm fairly upfront as to admitting to a mistake when it happens. Also, I've always been very lucky because I've always had managers above me who've always been very understanding.
Makes a big
So
difference.
it makes a huge difference. I
Mhm.
can't imagine that, in a situation when you have a manager who isn't. But I mean, I think it's essential to be understanding because we're human beings. So of course we're going to make mistakes. I think the important thing is not trying to hide it,
Mm.
but to sort of see how it can be solved. And usually most things, I mean, really 99.9% of things can be solved somehow. So, but yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. How do you feel about failure? Do you have an opinion on failure?
Well, yes, I think it's good because it really makes you, it makes you
Yeah.
think much more about something. When something goes well, you think, oh, great. Oh, well, you can't. Yeah, I'm not. It's audio, so I was just sort of blowing my fingertips and rubbing them on my shoulders to say I've done very well. So, when you do well, it's great. You just pat yourself on the back and whatever. But when you fail or when something falls through, it really does make you think much more about, why, what did we do wrong? What could we have done better?
Mhm.
I think that's a really important exercise. But it's quite funny, actually, just the last few months, we were working on a project for 3 months, which we were really excited about, and all the pieces were in place, and then suddenly they all fell apart for a certain amount of reasons. So the project didn't happen in the end. It wasn't tragic because it never got to actual fruition. So it's, we had to stop doing it before it actually happened. But in a way, that exercise was very, I mean, not in a way, it was very refreshing because
Mm.
you suddenly makes you sit back and think, well, why did this? What could we have done better? And in that particular case, I don't think it was a series of circumstances. So, there was no other way around it. But yeah, it's interesting. And you learn from it. Of course you do.
Yeah, you certainly do, definitely.
Mm.
And I think being open to that, and it sounds like you're very, yeah, self-aware in that sense that a mistake is another day and it can happen and we can work through it. And yeah, absolutely.
It's funny
Um,
as well in the arts, you make these mistakes and you say, well, at least that will never happen to me again. Lots of other things will, but that hopefully, like I have since that time, I mean, you cannot imagine this was like the ticket from Mexico to Madrid, but this is happening at 2 o'clock in the morning, my time, when I get the call saying, hey, I can't get on the plane because the artist hadn't looked at their, anyway, that's never going to happen. It was massive, and it was a few years ago and it was really expensive. We were on a really tight budget. In the end, luckily, this artist actually happened to have a friend who was working in the airline, and they changed their name on the ticket, which is like,
Amazing.
you know what it is. You can't normally do that.
Mm.
So it was okay, but it would have been big trouble.
Yes.
I can assure you that's never happened to me again. I have always checked that somebody, always it's like, can you just confirm your name as it is on your passport? So that's not happened again.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is my favorite part of the podcast. Every time we do a podcast, we ask our previous guest to ask a specific question for the next guest to answer. So last time, Sebastian interviewed Martina and Constanza, and people will have to listen to the podcast to find out more about them. But they have actually posed 2 questions to you, Cristina. So let's go through them. So the first one is, and I think we have covered quite a lot of this, so do feel free to pick an aspect or however you want. Martina would like to know, what relationship does your work have with the community?
Well, I mean, the work we do wouldn't exist without the community, basically.
Right.
I think also, I think that's another interesting trend in the UK, and it's happening here as well, that arts is only, is becoming more and more and more and more connected with the community, which makes complete sense. So we're trying to take it out of that, silver cage, which some art, high art is still in there, but yeah, no, you can't conceive art without the community. And I think that relationship also for artists, I mean, artists are human beings, so there are all sorts of artists. There are artists who are better at communicating with people than others. But for them, it's also really, really important, because after all, they are usually portraying life in some aspect. So yeah. So I think you can't understand art without the community, definitely.
Absolutely. And it's so ingrained in what you're doing that, yes, yeah, one goes with the other. And then secondly, Constanza would like to know, what advice would you give to those who work in the arts and culture currently so that they don't lose hope, or we don't lose hope, let's say?
Go and see a show. Go and see a show. Go and watch a dance performance. Go down to your local community centre where there's a local group putting on a play. Do that, and you'll see, and then you'll realise, and then you'll remember why you're doing it.
Brilliant advice. It's so true. And I think we can it's so easy to get distracted by the noise, isn't it? But actually, if we go and engage with why this brings us alive.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. Also, it is very true. It's a difficult sector these days to work in. So it's very underpaid. People are expected to overwork. In terms of kind of safe jobs, there's not a lot around, so it's very competitive, and I get it. I mean, I think it's a very, very difficult sector it's a difficult sector. Well, all sectors are, but it's not an easy sector to get into, but it's so rewarding. So yeah, it's definitely. And then at the end of the day, if you're not an artist, as I'm not, you're helping, you're facilitating artists to make that little bit of difference, which they do. And then the sum of all those is a big difference. So yeah, just go and get engaged with it, as you say. Go and see something.
Brilliant, thank you. We're nearing the end, which is sad but lovely. And I know. I could talk to you all day. Actually, it's really lovely and interesting hearing about your
likewise
your world.
Thank you.
We need to reflect, or I'd love to invite you to reflect on the podcast itself. So what we've just been talking about. And if you were to give this a tagline or a little slogan for your podcast episode, what would that be?
Oh, that's so difficult.
How can we summarize in a nutshell?
That's so difficult. I knew you were going to ask me this, and I've been thinking, and I just went blank. There's this little phrase that I used to have on my WhatsApp profile, it's in Spanish, but I translate as voy a bailar hasta que se acabe todo esto, which is I'm going to keep dancing until this is all over. Is that all right?
That is perfect. I
so
absolutely
maybe
love it.
It may not be Maypole, but
That's brilliant. Thank you. I love it. And I think that's the advice that, I would like to steal and give to everybody as well. Let's just keep dancing.
These days, let's just keep dancing until it's all over.
Absolutely.
One way or the other.
Yeah, totally. Cristina, it's been an absolute pleasure. There's only one last thing that we will be asking you to do, which is record a short video of your question for our next interviewee.
Sure.
But we can chat about that obviously after.
Okay.
But it's been a pleasure. I wish you all the best with the next, few years in your journey as the head of arts at the British Council, and hope that we can also come and visit you in Madrid to see more that goes on there as well.
Yeah,
But
I'm
yes,
really
it's been a
looking forward to seeing you here in Madrid and to doing an interview to you.
Oh, exciting.
Yes.
Sign me up. Lovely. And hopefully at some point you can come and see the work that we're doing in La Caldera as well with the exchange.
I'd love to. No, I definitely intend to. So yeah,
Fantastic.
that has to happen soon.
Oh,
Because
well,
you're doing
thank you.
great work there.
Thank you ever so much. And thank you to all of our listeners for episode 142 as well. We look forward to connecting in the next episode.